All right, so first review of the day going to be Team FlyQuest versus Cloud9. So Cloud9 coming back in, they've done their boot camp over in Korea for the majority of the off seasons. They got a lot of practice while they're out here, so you expect them to come in pretty strong and feeling good. And FlyQuest were a team that was kind of near and dear to my heart, to be honest. Like they were a team that I thought, honestly, were very much on the up. I was very impressed with their performance specifically against Team Liquid in the second round robin of the spring season. And then at the end of the day, they did fall away. I thought they were pretty disappointing in the postseason, but they were a team that I think had something about them and the team that had something to grow upon. I think their roster is pretty good too. So for North America, obviously. So at the end of the day, I think they definitely had some things to like about them. Oh right, this was this series where pick and ban exploded, right? I like how you can hear like the little audio around. Don't worry, the stream's not crashing over here. This is actually what happened on the stream. I forgot about this. Things definitely took a turn for this VOD review. And the casters have to talk. From memory, they actually speak out pick bans. In case you guys are wondering what's happening here, the casters will have on the right hand side of on stage right, no stage left, but their right, the in-game pick bans. But they'll also have the stream to see that actually the stream is getting no pick ban information because the overlay broke. So it's actually pretty stressful. You become a radio caster for a bit here because you're trying to give thousands of people information on the pick ban without any visual representation of the pick ban outside of some behind the back shots of champions being locked in. So that's actually pretty stressful to work through. But they'll get there eventually. I know this problem does abate. We'll skip through the issues they had. Fill, because you can't fill here with jokes or anything, right? The pick ban's actually going on, so it's actually a very interesting situation to be in. So, first review of the new patch, patch 9.10. From what I understand, we're going to be on patch 9.11 in Korea this week, but 9.10 because of the short amount of time between 9.11 releasing and 9.10 in the LCS. Had a look over the notes. A lot has changed and not much has changed. There's the huge change of the Scuttle spawn timer, which I think is actually a really big change that changes the effective jungle champion pool a bit, but it's not going to be fully explored in week one of the LCS and without, tens to hundreds of pro games on the patch. So understandable that you expect this to largely represent what we saw going on at MSI and what we reviewed last week in our VOD review. Looking here at champ select so far, the first pick Galio is not the nerfed Galio. That's 9.11 change. So on 9.10, this is just, support Galio as you remember it. The bans, Draven ban, very noticeable one. Outside of Cloud, I feel like Zyra Khan it's gone back to being kind of first two picks on red side or second round together picks on blue side. Like Zyra Khan is back as the bot lane of choice on this patch. So understandable Rakan ban sent out on the blue side. Sonataric ban into Yumi ban is what we see from FlyQuest. And there were Sonataric games played, of course, on this week of the LCS with no changes to those champions. So no surprise that NA is still playing it. Very interesting to see if Korea and other regions will still be on Sonataric. But yeah, the Sonataric kind of scenario and the power of Zyra Khan is something that I think both LPL and LCS, which are the only two major regions running on 910, were kind of able to show. So when it comes to picks, two flex picks from FlyQuest, they already have their entirety of their solo lanes secured in the first round. C9 responds with the reworked Aatrox, so there's a fun new one. And I think Aatrox is being spoken about really glowingly by a lot of analysts I speak to. I guess I kind of have a different read on Aatrox's power level than some other people do. A lot of people point to how strong Aatrox is in 5v5s as a reason that he should be kind of first pick, first ban status. And I agree that his team fighting now is like pretty insane. Like he wasn't a great team fighter before, but now his team fighting is pretty insane with the amount of sustain he can get. And I think after a couple of items, he's so annoying to deal with in team fights. And I get that as a reason why Aatrox is powerful. But Aatrox's power in the past was his ability to be a strong, flexible laner that can always get through almost any lane assignment. Like he was, for a time, the best pick into things like Vladimir, his healing reduction, and the fact that he played weak side so well. And what I mean by that is you could hard camp your bot lane and then Aatrox wouldn't die to ganks because he had his ultimate. Now that his ultimate doesn't give him a strong weak side game, I actually think his laning phase is pretty weak. Like I actually don't think Aatrox is a super strong pick for lane. I don't think you can just blind pick him and BK for lane like he was before. I think like stuff like Fiora like hard dumpsters him now. And it was already strong against him in lane because you just kill him when you couldn't kill him before. And yes, there's a payoff later, but that falls under the S word, right? Like he's a bit of a scaling pick in lane. I think the jungle might be a way to hide that from him. Like I think his jungling is still fine. But even then, his turret diving was the reason you picked him because level 6, you could just tank and ensure the kill. And there's going to be scenarios now where he can't tank the turret because he might die, right? And the resetting of aggro isn't a trivial thing to do. So I actually think Aatrox is overrated based on kind of this like super glowing endorsement of this champion is busted. Like I don't think he's Yumi level of busted, but he's powerful in a way that he wasn't before. And that makes him really annoying to deal with. And the amount of sustain, like, you know, the highlight clip plays of him with Death's Dance and other healing, getting like all of his health back in a team fight, they are obviously super bogus. But I think the people saying that he's like permaban status, I don't see it for pro games right now. Like Sylas is way more busted than Aatrox, the way I look at it. And the trade-offs here are interesting because if you notice in the first round, the only banned of the 5 flex picks, which are, of course, Ryze, Aurelia, Sylas, Jace. We're skipping one here. Akali. The only one banned was Jace. And that part isn't surprising because the thing we learned about Jace was that Jace was the best of the flex picks at MSI because it was a physical damage champion that could flex and have priority in lane compared to the abundance of magic damage champions that could truly lane top and mid. And, you know, the problems you had in getting enough physical damage on a team. So, at the end of the day, I understand the Jace ban, but there's a lot open here. Like for me, Akali is still really, really powerful. Especially on patch 9.10 rather than 9.11 after the latest nerf. But no Akali first round. The Sylas taken into either Ryze or the Aurelia. Can lane against both those. The Ryze is probably the better matchup. The Ryze kind of takes a lot longer to get control over the Sylas. The Aurelia has kind of situational all-in moments there. And then just a first round Braum. It's going to be into Galio. It's, you know, it's pretty standard. Not a lot of teams take Tahm Kench anymore. Melee laner against the Galio so they can guarantee a face check if that part makes sense. And this is something I want to talk about. We're going to be seeing a lot more of power pick Xayah when it isn't just Xayah Rakan. Like this is a phenomena in the past where there only be a very handful of teams that played only Xayah. There was, for example, many teams that power picked Rakan. I always reference Afrika Freaks and Tucson for being we just want Rakan, don't care about the Xayah Rakan. But when it came to Xayah only teams, I think of SK Telecom with Bang. And of course, the best example is Uzi on RNG. I think Xayah, with all the Essence Reaver buffs and the fact that she has been directly and indirectly buffed, her items and also her numbers, is really powerful right now. I think if you can get an Essence Reaver carry that doesn't lose lane, that's big. I think her ultimate is super high value with the Flex Assassins running around. We're going to be seeing a lot of Xayah, whether it's Xayah Braum or Xayah Rakan. I think Xayah right now is really, really powerful. So just a little thought into that. The AD carry tier list has definitely kind of taken a pretty big shift with some of the nerfs and buffs recently. So we just skip through what we see here on the side of C9. They were thinking about Lucian Galio, which is like an SKT favorite, and they didn't go that way. I guess they didn't want to go for a mid-range carry, did C9. They wanted to have a very, very strong laning option, and definitely it's a lot safer for the Varus here. And the Vi pick here is super intriguing from the side of FlyQuest, because you look at the enemy team and you say, who is Vi ulting? And the answer is obviously Varus, but there's only really one target here that you are really kind of excited about ulting. Everyone else is kind of like, I don't know about that. The jungle pool right now, if you're looking at what's banned and what's available, there's not a lot of jungle bans here. As far as I know, Jarvan is available, right? That's a Sivir ban, a Kai'Sa ban, Ezreal ban. I actually can't tell what the final ban is. I guess it could be Jarvan. I don't. The bans are cut off on the bottom left of the screen, in case you're wondering. But I feel like Vi is definitely a fallback jungle, like Cuz showed in the semifinal of MSI. And yes, Clid played it. Semifinal of Spring, and yes, Clid played it in MSI. But given the scenario that Santorin is in, like, you look at the lanes and say, well, how much priority do we have? And it's easier to kind of spell this out when the lane assignments are clearer. I actually don't think Aatrox beats Aurelia in lane by any means. I like Sylas early against Ryze, but so that's, you know. So the Aatrox, we'll say a little bit of advantage Aurelia, but not like a massive advantage there. The Ryze versus Sylas, I'd give to Sylas. I'd definitely take Varus Galio over Xayah Braum in the laning phase. So I think Vi can work pre-6 when you have strong winning matchups. And then at the end of the day, post-6, it's just a strong champion generally. But it's the sort of champion that can't do a lot about influencing the game state pre-6. And then suddenly you might never have the map control to not just be walking over vision when you're trying to enter a lane as Vi. And if, yeah, Vi from ahead, kind of like we were talking about with Tarek, a win more scenario can be very powerful, but Vi winning a game straight up at the pro level, it is pretty unlikely. So this to me was a very surprising spot to go Vi, given that so much else was up. It's another good pickup for Niski as well. Like, Sylas stealing Vi ultimate gives him even more gap close. So we can jump into the game here. Keyboard controls working again. Thank you very much to the YouTube integration here. Again, we're not on ProView this week, guys. There's still some things to be worked out between Riot and content creators to use ProView for VOD reviews. So for this week, it is just YouTube, in case you guys are wondering. It's a very passive level 1. I think it's the first game on stage from 9-10 outside of the LPL games that happened earlier in this series. Information on Vi's pathing, I think, is really important. You could say the same thing about Hecarim. By the way, the runes are wrong. It's not Halo Blades Hecarim and things like that. The overlay was wrong here. So they were clearly having some teething problems moving on to 9-10. Hopefully we don't have the same problems in LCK. The Klepto Xayah, sadly, not going to be happening. I'm so focused on these wrong keystones that I find it hard to talk about much. I know they do fix it later. I watched the first 10 minutes of this game also live, but it was a 6 a.m. start, so I wasn't able to watch all of this game. It's the only part I've seen of the games I'm reviewing today. So this is what priority does for you, in case you're wondering, when I was talking about Sylas versus Rise. Yes, Sylas has to use a lot of his health bar to make this happen, but if you focus specifically on Hecarim's pathing, Hecarim abuses Talisman in order to clear the Raptors really fast. He doesn't go for a 3-camp clear. That's why you see the question mark pings here. This is the most interesting part of the early game. Santorin assumes that Hecarim is taking Krugs, because Hecarim is actually a pretty fast Krug taker. That's why you get the question mark ping there. It's from Santorin saying, that's where I think Hecarim is going to be. But it's actually pretty smart of Svenskeren. And Svenskeren's a player who impressed us on Hecarim, you'll remember, in the Cloud9 versus TSM LCS Spring semifinal. Because he was just playing Hecarim before it was cool with the Sona Tarek. Here what we see is that Svenskeren skips over doing the expected Krug camp to invade because he has priority in the mid lane. If you have Sylas versus Rise, and Sylas, because at level 1 he has one of the strongest abilities of the game, gets 2 passive procs, he's able to take an aggressive trade and push the lane. Sylas is able, situationally, to shove in Rise, and thus, that's the sort of move that lets you invade with the Hecarim. So Svenskeren actually subverts what a lot of people assumed would be the standard jungle pathing on patch 9.10, or I guess 9.9 onwards. The change was that Scuttle Crab doesn't spawn until 3 minutes 15, so that early Scuttle contest doesn't happen. And obviously, Hecarim's not a very strong champion at taking Scuttle. He's okay, but he wasn't kind of the Camille school of thought around that area. So you would have thought, okay, you got more time to farm, power farm through, helicopter through those Raptors pretty quickly. Talisman keeps your mana up, and you're level 3, and then you're level 3 Hecarim fighting. That's the reason you go Hecarim now. The change here is that he skips over the easy level 3, the bread and butter for most solo queue junglers. And if you watch his pathing, he goes topside clear into the blue here for a late invade. So you could have gone just blue buff, but he wants to take another camp for the invade timing here, and he wants to hit level 3 to go for this invade. So he's just at a different spot. He's still level 3, but level 3 topside and looking for an invade around 243 just doesn't happen if you're going for Krug clear into blue into invade. And that's surprises Santorin, who's smites for level 3. He's not caught at his red buff, but I do like how tricky it is. And while Niski's health bar has to be sacrificed to get the initial shove, this is all about the ability to rotate fast. Pobelter, when he gets ult, Pobelter, if it's later in the laning phase, might get first response, but Sylas with a dash, with a ability to connect, and his Hecarim invading, it's just a plan from C9 to put pressure on the Vi, as you never want Vi getting a free level 6. Even more so than someone like the Hecarim. Praise be, by the way, we got the correct keystones, so nothing too surprising here with the setup. Ends up being a trade of scuttles, and we can't learn too much about jungle pathing because I think this is very early days about how 3.15 will look. In case you're wondering, my expectation was that Krug clearers would be indirectly buffed, and definitely you put Hecarim as someone who clears Krugs a lot easier than someone like Jarvan, and the priorities would change a bit because you get a bit more farming time before you have to fight over a Scuttle Crab. But then at the pro level, the logical extensions are, when do the invade timings happen? How many camps do you take before you hit a lane? If you level 2 or level 3 gank, how many camps have you taken before you get that? There's no predictable path. There's no scouted out starts on 3.15 with no pro games. So we'll definitely sit back and appreciate the good of what we're seeing from jungle pathing, but understandably, it's going to take a lot more to fully understand what the best path forward is on 8.15. Did Hecarim even win that invade, though? I think the answer to that question is not a definitive yes by any means, but I think it's, again, more of a teaching moment on C9 saying, here's what we have. We have the ability to change our kind of jungle camp clear, and we have priority mid lane. Let's try for a red buff contest and see what happens. So the answer is no, they didn't get red buff invade, and some of the camp order and resets here, like not having a Krug reset earlier, is going to be in a vacuum an overall bad thing for the Hecarim. But I think given the scenario of let's look for an aggressive move that could potentially just reset the enemy jungle. If you don't get Vi's red buff, she has basically no jungle pressure pre level 6, and it means that you can't actually impact lanes on her. So your potential of being counter ganked as Hecarim if you went for a lane gank is basically 0. So it's a huge win if you get the red buff. And just as an aggressive move that had a very low chance of being scouted, as we got confirmed by Santorin's question mark ping on the wrong area. I think overall, it sets in the game plan that C9 is pushing this series of take over red side jungle. It's a bit of a spoiler, but C9 play a lot of this series getting advantages over their control of red side jungle. So seeding that early by going for this kind of delayed invade onto the red buff is a smart way to have an area to return to and again where you can find advantages. So I think I recognize your point right now. As of now, you'd say they lost more than they gained, but I think you'll see that overall, the advantages they ceded by early signifying to the enemy team that, hey, we're coming for your red buff, actually have great payoffs for C9. So this would definitely be a pro view replay if we had access to the pro view here. I think there's going to be a replay of it anyway, but this is actually really well played by Viper overall. Only small disadvantage is he doesn't get to push in the minion wave. So what happens here is that there's a huge AD discrepancy, and Viper wants to punish Licorice for not taking a back timing. So that's what prompts this all-in that you see on your screen here, is that if you look at it, it's freshly shopped most of it Tiamat versus nothing shopped from Licorice, and he wants to punish him for it. If you get the kill and push in the lane, this is a huge win for Viper. Now, overall, though, it's a 1-for-1. The crucial disadvantage is going to be lane positioning. So we're actually going to have to look at it to see actually how the minion wave is affected by this. Because getting to TP straight onto the area and Irelia having to walk up kind of muddies the waters a little bit. Chat asking, hey everyone, does the all access mean that I will get pro view for LCK and LPL? It hasn't been clarified just yet to Cody Doc. So I guess the hope is that eventually all the major regions will be there, but there's no clarification on that just yet. So C9 have double control ward topside. That's the big thing they have, and this leads to the first flare point. It's one of the real reasons I wanted to review this series, is that this kill happens. And in 1.5 times speed, you don't actually get too much out of it. But let's talk about the entire play that happened here. And it's a cool thing to consider. So the solo kill happens. Irelia has to walk back. We can see that she's not going to lose too many minions because the wave was mostly frozen out of Licorice's top side. But I can't see the lane state, unfortunately, as it's resting. All right, so it's going to be pushing out. If you look at the top side here, C9's minion wave, there's more blue dots than red dots, is going to push towards FlyQuest's turret. So setting up a freeze here is actually impossible. It's not going to freeze in that spot. It's going to have to push out. Now, you can just choose how fast it pushes out, but right now, at least, you can't freeze it. So Licorice has a lot of options for how he approaches this. His choice is to fast push. And Viper's like, well, I TP'd early. I got the 1-for-1, and I'm not going to lose minions. It's not too bad for me. But consider the state that the top red side jungle is in. Earlier, we saw C9 attempt a late invade on the red buff. They didn't get the buff. They chased out the Vi. Vi already implicitly knows, all right, top side, red side, my Raptors, my red buff, my Krugs, a little bit riskier to go to. I don't have a lot of control in that area. That part she knows. Now, the shove is happening, and Licorice knows that Irelia is going to go under turret. There's no chance Aurelia's cutting through the red side jungle to catch him here or anything like that. So it's a free invade timing. He also sees, as he makes the play, he's already leaving lane to go investigate, maybe put down a deep ward. You'll notice that he has a trinket ward available. He's looking to deep ward, but the deep ward evolves into the killing of Ryze. Now, this is where I would cut to the pro view of Pobelter. It's something that I prepped before the stream. But Pobelter, if you roleplay yourself as Pobelter, if you're chat, you'll notice here, okay, you can't see anything. Like if you are a red champion, the Rise here, you have no wards in your jungle. There are 2 control wards we know with map hacks, but you have no control of topside at all, and it's a place that's already been fighted in. And you also know that Aatrox has left the top lane. Now, you expect him to be deep warding the Krugs, which should be respawning soon. Instead, it's a really nice flank timing from Licorice, and even though Santorin's running into his red side jungle, it's not fast enough. So what I want to praise here, and again, this is hard with our POVs to fully show this to you guys. It's a really good roam timing from Licorice because he's going to, as you can see from the question mark pings here, most likely the question mark ping is, I'm going to put a deep ward down on the Krugs so we can maybe catch Vi there later. So he's warding largely for his Hecarim and for the late red side invades. And instead, at this moment, he understands a kill is possible. And that's the cool thing to see here. It's really good adaptive call from Licorice and Niski to say, Pobelta's too far up, we can kill him. Licorice roams down. He comes down here. Silas fully commits to this with the flash. It's very easy to say, lol, Pobelta, he died. But you need to also be a top laner who's looking to fully convert. He took a teleport back into lane rather than walk back into lane advantage and turned it into a kill, did Licorice, purely from being a front foot player that's looking for the maximum at all times. And it also takes into account that even if Santorin is there a little bit earlier, it's a Vault Breaker and no other real punishment, and you're not really under any other threat. So with the information available the team had, I think this is actually a really cool call coming through from C9, and it does play into the earlier contest on red buff that on paper didn't get anything, but in reality got something. Now, Licorice comes back into lane, straight up dies. So this is, of course, the sideways moment here. This is where I'm like, not so sure about that Aatrox. Note that Aatrox didn't need to ult to pick up the earlier kill. People have been asking about Aatrox, and again, there's a lot of words about Aatrox's power level. Previously, Licorice here is fine. He takes too aggressive a route into top lane. This is a very aggressive way to go with no minion wave and Viper at basically full passive stacks. But remember, previously as an Aatrox on weak side, and then if you're wondering why is it weak side, you can see down here that Hecarim is on the bottom side, so the weak side of the map. There's no reinforcements top side at all. Previously, Licorice would say, oh shit, and just ult, and he'd be fine, right? There's no way he dies twice in this scenario. Instead, he walks up to full passive stacks Aurelia and dies. So this is just a straight up mistake from Licorice, so kind of a bit of the good and the bad of the player there. I love the aggressive mindset to go for the invade, and I think Pobelta, was found out, but definitely don't re-enter the minion wave like that. That was the problem there. See, earlier solo kill. The very standard play against Aurelia is don't walk up to her if she has passive stacks. No trading, no harassing while she's getting those passive stacks. He wasn't in lane. But great to see from Viper. These two guys this is probably the most dynamic, watchable top lane matchup in North America. I'm not saying that Viper and Licorice are the two best top laners. But I think they're both up for a brawl, and Viper's, puffing out his chest more and more now that he's no longer a rookie player. And Licorice is always someone I love to watch. So it's just a real treat. Even though C9 versus FlyQuest is kind of a one-sided rivalry, it is really fun to see that. So cool to see Viper make this play. Now, this was the play that sold me on reviewing this game. So Santorin walks in and dies. This is the sort of play where ProView is going to really earn their money. This was the ProView play I had most in mind. I'm going to slow it down for a bit. So it is a return to what happened last time. The game state happens again. Licorice pushes in the minion wave, spotted leaving lane. So that's the information Santorin has right now. Viper's saying, all right, Licorice is on the roam. That's the only ward they have top side. For clarity, is the one that showed him walking into the river. So that one is fine. Now, Santorin, he doesn't want to give up his red buff. He gets spotted, and this is where Santorin knows that Licorice isn't in lane and just warded. There's no one else that would realistically have made this ward. So that information is still out there. So Santorin, understandably nervous with how to play. He doesn't want his top laner getting dived. And that's why he can't just go bot side. Also worth noting, he has no camps to kill on the bot side with Scuttle not spawned yet. So Santorin kind of just wants to take his Raptors and leave. Sylas had also invaded and pinged out, so Santorin should anticipate that his Raptors have been warded. And Licorice still hasn't gone back to lane. So Santorin obviously should be super scared. My question to viewers is, from this point onwards, what is Santorin's biggest mistake and the thing that on VOD review he should correct? So let's focus on Santorin, watch it in 1x speed. What is Santorin's biggest mistake here? I've given you guys some context already. We're just watching Santorin. So a lot of things he'd like to have over, right? His flash is to try to get a Q over the wall is not great. His killing of the ward that was just placed recently was not great. I'd love to understand what chat takes away as Santorin's biggest mistake. And I thought this would be more impactful from, you know, the ProView POV, which I was able to watch. So definitely consider, if you have ProView, go to around 850 and watch it from Santorin's perspective if you have it right now. In future streams, hopefully I'll be able to do that. And see what chat kind of votes on as the thing he did wrong. Everything, says one person. I mean, again, he'd like to have a lot of it done over, but I don't think everything is right. Killing Raptors is... And kiting Raptors, that's a point that's made here. So many mistakes there. But thankfully, Twitch chat actually smart here. The main mistake that Santorin makes in this play, the one that makes it a bad play, is revealed here. Given the information he had that Licorice still hasn't gone back to top side, that there's a ward on the camp, and that it's very likely that 1 to 3 players are in his red side jungle, the place that's been invaded twice before, you never Vault Breaker to start this camp. Yes, Vault Breaker is your first max and your fastest way to kill monsters, but if you're going to take the camp in your weak side jungle and not just stand in the brush as a ward, you never start with Q. That's his biggest mistake here, and it's only on the VOD review, that's the thing he wouldn't have over. If you know there's a very good chance 2 to 3 people are topside, do not start this camp with your gap closer or your escape tool. Yes, you have flash up, but as you can see from the play in full speed, the moment that it all goes from here, he tries to flash Q and then he gets tugged back by the W. It's not as simple as your flash is up. If you have Q and flash there, you don't die. But the fact that he had Q on cooldown is the actual mistake there. So I hope that's the thing that people understand, and that's what I would hope Santorin would take away, because there's another way to look at this and be like, all right, Santorin, you don't know what's happening in your red side jungle, just give it up. Just go like walk all the way around. If we have the mouse cursor, you can walk all the way around and just take down your Scuttle. You just died for your Raptors, lol. But that's not what this play is about. You know Sylas is topside. You know Licorice is 99% camping your jungle somewhere. This could be 3 people going to turret dive your top laner who's got, 2 solo kills. You can't have that happen. It is your job to repel that as this jungler, as the Vi, who doesn't have a lot of gank pressure until right now in the game and couldn't actually set up the map beforehand. Or they could be coming to kill the Ryze again, who's still very, very squishy with only boots 2 and mana as the completions here. What you need to understand is Vi has to stay topside. And killing the Raptors is fine, or at least leashing the Raptors, because the Raptors might actually walk over and spot someone who's coming for an invade beforehand. You cannot go bot side Scuttle here because your solo lanes lose too much in this game. So all things considered, the only play that, if you're at home watching, that you should learn from this is you never Vault Breaker when you suspect the enemy is around topside. Same choice with Sejuani, Arctic Assault, and things like that. What if he would have dragged the Raptors into the bush? I think definitely he'd be more likely to live if he queued in and then dragged the Raptors. But I think the more important takeaway is it doesn't matter if it takes you 3 seconds longer to kill the Raptors. You're taking the camp topside so that you have a gold reason to stay topside because you already have the macro reason to stay topside. You know, there's other specific questions here. Is Vault Breaker okay there if he leaves the second? There's definitely ways he could have lived where he used Vault Breaker, but the primary reason to be topside is not killing the Raptors. The Raptors is the bonus while you're topside to help your team. So given that the protection is the first thought and not farming the 90, 100 gold, don't use the Vault Breaker there. Anyway, just a cool moment that ProView definitely helped me kind of look over and prep a bit more. And hopefully in future streams, I'll have that actual technology for this. But I hope that even without the kind of experience of being Santar in this moment with his HUD up, you can see that it's another definite struggle for C9. And it's for FlyQuest, sorry. And I think C9 plays the first 10 minutes of this game so well. Like, I really hope LCK teams can play the first 10 minutes of games in this style, because you don't look at C9 and be like, wow, they're playing like Invictus Gaming or G2. But what you're seeing is they have an aggressive agency about their play in their lanes. They're making invading-based plays, which I believe with limited vision are the way to play the 2019 meta. And even though the first invade at 3 minutes for a red buff didn't work, Licorice's lane roams and the times in lane where he can roam minimizes the times where Aurelia versus Aatrox actually more Aurelia favored, given the Aatrox ult change to no longer have free revive on weak side. And it also allows Aatrox to push in, get advantages, and not actually be in a 1v1 scenario. So I think C9 actually played the first 10 minutes really well here, and it was something that I loved watching from a team that, again, prepped really hard in off-season in Korea, but is playing their first stage game. A lot of topside players here from C9. They know that their advantages are mostly topside. Aurelia can only look for those aggressive players when she has eyes on the enemy. And for the majority of this game, they've had no control of topside vision at all. That's why actually the scenario here bot lane is one that I didn't even notice when I was watching the game earlier. Is quite alarming. Look at the CS difference in bot lane. Yes, we know Varus Galio should be favored against Xayah Braum. Varus is just the strongest possible 2v2 laning champion in a nutshell. But with Vi being so shut down, the flow-on effect of all these invades, not even the 2-3 kills they picked up topside, it's that there's no respect for Vi as a champion at all, because she's just both being spotted topside and pre-level 6 Vi. So you're just playing as if there's no enemy jungler, because honestly, effectively, there's not. And Sneaky in lane has been able to grow a really big lane lead, even though Hecarim has never been bot side. So the flow-on effect there is actually pretty damn massive. Licorice has lost out on a bit of CS. Overall, the gold lead isn't huge, but yeah, I didn't even notice the numbers bot side. Total must have made some laning mistakes as well here, just because Xayah's on the safer side, but again, don't have the ability to fully look over that. Like, moments like this should never happen. You know, Total is off on item completion here by a lot. Like, Blade versus almost Essence Reaver is, like, ultra beneficial for the Varus. So when did he have to take his back? He had to take his back at 78 CS. So it's a defensive back timing from the Xayah. And it's a fresh shop at 10 minutes or 11 minutes with no Essence Reaver, which is just awful from the Xayah's perspective. The Crit Cloak gives you almost nothing in lane, so... And that just means that now, while Turtle really doesn't want to fight around bot side, even though, you know, top side is also in kind of a muddied position here, so it's definitely a tricky scenario. And FlyQuest have to now invest multiple resources. People were asking, should Rise have helped topside around the Vi player? And I think they were disconnected due to a lane breakpoint. The downside when you're in a scenario like this, where in terms of priority, Aurelia has 1v1 priority, but they can't snowball that into any vision control topside. It just means that Aurelia can kill Aatrox with the information she doesn't have. Meanwhile, bot side is losing, mid side priority is 0. They've had no priority on top or bot side here as FlyQuest. That means you have to invest extra resources like Rise walking down just to get vision in any areas of the map. So it's a really bold choice to start up the Drake here. Now, was Hecarim spotted? Okay, so Hecarim was spotted on the control ward. That's why they made this play. So shout out to Viper, who did get the vision possible to get this Drake start. This Drake never happens unless this happens. So Viper's roam down to put the control ward on blue buff. Actually gets them a Drake. So he was able to set up something. That's shout out to Viper. It's a small point that's going to be missed in live speed, but really nicely done there. Getting anything with just how hamstrung FlyQuest are in terms of any sort of lane kind of priority here is actually so tricky. And Torrent spots the Rift Herald, but they've never had priority in this area. Just backs away. If not for the control ward, Svenskeren gets a 12.5-minute Rift Herald, and FlyQuest gets some wards on the Cloud Drake, but no more. So, big shout out to first Viper for the deep ward, and also FlyQuest for understanding that gave them kind of an objective against the flow of play. Turret plating goes down, and for all C9's good roams, it doesn't give them a huge gold lead. Their tempo, which again is a word that's super overused by casters, but their ability to leave lane and make things happen is far above FlyQuest, who kind of need conditional things to happen on the enemy side to do things. So it's like they're threatening to take over this game as C9, but they haven't actually unleashed that power, and it does mean the game is still relatively even, within 1,000 gold. With Santorin's level 6 available, with some tools coming down the enemy's way, and whether they'll actually ever lead to kind of 50-50s because their map control is so minimal, we're going to wait to see. But again, so much easier to use a Rift Herald when you have map control. So Cloud9 gets the double charge on the Rift Herald here, and now the gold lead again hovers around 1,000. But things like tempo only matter if you make active plays. That early invade by the Hecarim only matters if they re-invade again and again 3 times within the first 10 minutes. So good to see Cloud9 translating on that, but it was very much a really good job, Cloud9. Amazing play. You should learn from this. But actually, in effect, it didn't have a lot of impact on the gold total when it was just a snapshot in time at 15 minutes. Triple Conqueror topside, just for really extended brawling. You'll notice Nixky has dropped the Aftershock here. This is after the Aftershock changes, so Aftershocks will still be taken situationally on some champions who just can't afford to lose a skirmish in the first, say, 20 minutes of the game. But Triple Conqueror just means that Licorice, Svenskeren, and Niski, who are all brawling champions, Hecarim, Aatrox, and Silas, all, last a long time. They're all, have different kind of pseudo-tankiness, shielding on the Silas, healing on the Hecarim, and obviously healing on the Aatrox is to huge levels. In an extended fight, they're going to be super immovable. So the C9 comp here is basically 3 brawlers in the front line, Aatrox, Hecarim, and Silas. None of them do ignorable damage. And if you're diving in as Vi Aurelia on to the Varus, that's nice. And you're going to get Varus, right? You can't disregard Vi ult, so you're going to get on top of Varus, and you're probably going to kill him eventually, whether Galio is taunting or not. However, there's going to be like a mosh pit of badassery with Aatrox, Hecarim, and Vi that's going to clean up basically everyone in the race to get to the Varus. So I actually like the 5v5 here from C9 in a kind of non-conventional way. It can play 1-3-1 really well, but you don't often see triple conqueror. I've seen it a little bit more often recently, and it's kind of cool how this triple conqueror Bruise Bros trio with Aatrox, Hecarim, and Silas dives in, and if you kill one, we all know that Aatrox ult reset comes in, and then there's just no way to turn around after you kill Varus. Like, the way I look at team fights here is that Viper and Centaur dive onto Sneaky and eventually kill him. If Licorice, Svenskeren, and Niski get one kill while the dive is happening, they turn around, you can't disregard the Aatrox, and you just get overwhelmed. So kind of a cool way to think of it. So I actually really do favor C9 as the game goes on, and they had nice proactive moves as well. C9 gets first priority on all objectives, like we mentioned. FlyQuest were never able to set up a strong side of the map. I think he missed on ult, so out of lane actually is where the first problem happens. So this was a pretty big throw by C9. Again, one of my favorite things to talk about is unforced errors. Again, consider that we already mentioned that C9 actually have pretty much whole map tempo or map control over what decisions are made. They can decide whether it's a fast game or a slow game. They decide if we're fighting now or we're not fighting. Fights can never happen if FlyQuest want them because they're kind of behind on control. You're not just going to randomly ult and int. So sensible fights will only happen if C9 wants them. And C9 could just play the side lanes that were going very comfortably. They could just threaten Hecarim dives and get free objectives here. And they could just push in different lanes around the top side and mean that FlyQuest can't get into 5v5 scenarios to actually be able to get an honest fight. But FlyQuest gets an honest fight here because Niski just decides we're going. That's with Licorice and Svenskeren nowhere near the fight. If you swap Sneaky Zazel with Licorice Svenskeren, this ult's fine because you have those Bruise Bros trio going in at once. Instead, it's all so disconnected between the two, and it's so desperate, right? Niski goes in, the Galio ult comes in a bit later, Svenskeren ints into the backline. Like, there's no synergy between Hecarim, Aatrox, and Silas at all. Like, this should have been a pretty straightforward fight win for C9, but they get too hasty because the game's gone largely their way and just throw it all pretty instantly. Now, from the FlyQuest perspective here, if you're going to watch it, the moment it comes down, JJ has a pretty straightforward job, right? Like, it's honestly JJ's job to disrupt this after the hard engage. He just opens up the ult. It hits two members. It means that the Hecarim is slightly late. And then it's just Hecarim the backline. It's not Hecarim, Silas, and Aatrox at all. And then FlyQuest can just play closest target. It's pretty insane that a fight like this can happen when C9's so far ahead, but it's very much a day one thing. Like, to me, I look at this and I'm like, this is what happens when you're playing on day one. You're feeling generally good about your play. You're doing in fine. And the Galio doesn't come in at all. Like you mentioned, it's just knocked up by the Braum, which also stops the Hecarim. The Braum ult there by JJ is solid, but my focus is on C9's decision to fight when they'd already missed the Varus ultimate. There's a reason not to fight. The rest of their frontliners aren't in position. The Galio, if he'd come down, actually would have knocked up almost nobody. So while the interrupt is slick by JJ, it doesn't change the flow of the fight. And then Aatrox just dies, right? Because there is no refresh there. So C9 definitely conspired to get the least out of what the lead they had, and suddenly this was like pretty much a 50-50 game. Like, any game where you're 20 minutes in and Vi's getting an even game after getting so well tracked in the first parts of the game is very concerning for C9. Like, this felt like C9 had kind of unsettled themselves. But it was also the sort of mistake that we said already was a C9 mistake rather than a FlyQuest outplay. So there was always the chance that C9 could adjust their play from here and make some smart adjustments to not just do that again. See, they're already changing the lane assignments. They're not interested in Aatrox laning against the Aurelia. Understandable. It's not quite Fiora level. It's a bad matchup, but like we mentioned, you can't shrug off an all-in from Aurelia with your ult anymore. That's why we end up with these assignments. A lot of tools used here. Let's watch over how this all happened. Viper's accuracy is baiting all these engages. If you watch this play here, with everyone reacting, Viper's stun provokes the stolen Silas ult, another ult used by the team. Cooldown trade here is really nice for the side of FlyQuest, given everything, except for the TP. The TP here is actually kind of strange. When does he choose to teleport? The teleport is just a provoke. Okay, it's provoked by Licorice. I get it. So Licorice tries to make a fight happen, and they just draw out a teleport. So I think overall it's a pretty good cooldown trade on this side. It was the first TP was from Licorice to keep the minion up to allow for a turret dive. The team started to move away when they saw the answering one. But how does this happen? So Xayah's spotted on Vision. So is Aurelia. And then C9 just pulled the trigger. This is a much better time to pull the trigger. Consider before where we criticized them for the stolen Vi ultimate. This is the perfect time to pull the trigger because they can communicate. Aurelia and Xayah are not here. JJ is not full health by any means. He used his ult and his flash. Kill him. This is the sort of stuff that we can praise C9 for, making a good proactive play on the top side. Now they can surround for a while, and they still have information on Aurelia to get this kill. Really big win for C9. So again, if we criticize them before, we reward them for this. The vision onto the roam here is the true MVP. They can proxy the minion wave on the top side, and then FlyQuest go in one by one. We saw Pobelta walk up and die on the top red side. We saw Santorin, and while this is different to those solo mistakes, this is kind of the flow-on of what we were seeing from FlyQuest before. Their comms are very immediate. Again, we can't see the comms, we're speculating, but their play suggests that communication is very, this is what we see, this is what we don't see, and then making full decisions based on that. They're not respecting what it all means as a complete piece and how C9 can cut them down for it. So I think overall, FlyQuest just very individualistic in their decision making on the top side. They don't understand it's so easy for them to be punished when they're one by one in these scenarios, and I see people are really enjoying the Aatrox sustain here. Let's look at some sustain numbers. I wasn't even watching. Are we ready for some Aatrox ult numbers? Where's he at? Where's our boy Aatrox? So Aatrox presses his ult. I saw 124, 81. 199. Oh, 326 on the Q. That's third Q, right? Let's watch that one again. 64 auto. 387, 199, 326, 300. Oh, it's beautiful. And this is the part you don't need to sell me on. I agree with you guys. I think Aatrox teamfight is pretty disgusting. But if you remember, Aatrox got solo killed twice in this game. And I think that Aatrox, he occupies a different spot than he did before. Huh, okay. Well, the Ryze versus Sylas matchup is turned. We get some item timings to see this. During lane, Ryze will lose trades against Sylas, but there's always a tipping point. Double pen, 40% CDR clearly is the tipping point here. Let's watch the 1v1. Watch this 1v1. This is the tipping point. This is where Rise starts to outskate Silas in the 1v1. Oh. Watch the timer here, by the way. So, pause the game when we see this point. Niski is, I guess, 90% health. Before any damage done, we're at 2303. 2303, first overload is 531. Now, he's doing close to true damage. I would assume he has what? 33 magic pen and 51 magic resist onto the Silas. 2303, the trade started. 2307, the enemy champion is dead. He hundreds to zeroed them off a single chain. EQ, EWQ, EQ. Huh. Interesting. Rise balance level, baby. Yeah. We all love Rise on this stream. Silas is balanced, but Rise is more balanced. Can't dodge that damage. Silas is a really interesting one in that he restricts your pick ban decisions a lot, and he's just in general very flexible and has priority in a lot of lanes. So if you think about this game, the moment Silas locked in, FlyQuest had to think about what ults they took, and in the early game, they got to shove because Silas blind basically shoves against everything, and that got them their invade into the red side, and then they killed Pobelter, and then they killed Santorin. So they got a lot out of the Silas, and there's not many champions who at the 23-minute mark can solo kill Silas in the side lane. Rise is one of those champions, so it is very much a nuclear warhead versus off-brand nuclear warhead situation, but you get your wins in one area with Silas and your wins in other areas with Rise. And then Svenskeren almost gets solo killed too, because that's just Rise. Like we mentioned, FlyQuest have to give up Drake control, like you would have assumed. Gold is basically even here. Our read on this game is that C9's dive trio should get more work done than FlyQuest's dive duo. And that's obviously 3 is more than 2, but again, Aatrox getting an ult reset, I feel like they can't lose a team fight if both teams kind of get their man. Let's watch how the actual reality happens here. Ooh, Licorice around the walls around this area. Has solo won them games before, so I'm always scared when I see blue side Licorice on Aatrox in the enemy blue side jungle. He's really good at popping in at the right time. Yep. So, again, our read was C9 probably have the better 5v5. It's a lot easier to execute because the only thing FlyQuest can do is squash Sneaky like a bug. That's, the Vi mechanic, right? Let's watch the replay here. AD carry is always interesting. I'm watching Wild Turtle at the bot side. Oh, the flash there was a sad one. The flash there was a sad one. Because you watch Sneaky here, and normally team fights are about AD carry versus AD carry, but you watch how much damage Sneaky really does. He sidesteps Braum ult, walks up, throws down an ult, auto E, couple of autos, but the team fight's largely decided before Sneaky even gets there because of the burst dive bros here. The dive trio. This is very much what they were looking to set up the last time, and FlyQuest just can't answer it. If you're wondering how you confidently know which team fight beats which team fight, if you think about the expected team fight that happens between these two teams, like what the abilities do between two teams when it's a true 5v5, think about how much space the champions on C9 threaten and control with their expected team fight, i.e. Aatrox presses ult, and his Q has a pretty large radius. Hecarim ult has very large engage range, and it's a pretty large radius. And Sylas is just brawling with those two people, compared to FlyQuest, where Irelia dives on one person and threatens them, Vi dives on one person and threatens them. And in this case, you would expect it to be Varus every other time. Meanwhile, the Ryze is one who kind of wants to just skirmish against one person for a long time, does some AoE in fights, but needs prep time, needs rounds of his E and like skill threading. There's not a lot of skill threading when you're AoE feared or knocked up or stunned. And that's why you give team fights to comps like C9, because in expected scenarios where they don't just have a Sylas steal Vile and into the backline before Hecarim can even ult, the buttons from FlyQuest, when they're pressed, will do way less than the buttons from C9 more often than not. And that's why you feel like you run this team fight 10 times, at least 8.5 times it looks like this. Someone in chat saying Loco POV reviewed and his mouse slipped. Very possible. Obviously, it would have been better to die without flashing there, like while Toto was dying one way or the other, but ended up being a witness me moment that didn't get them too much, and that's the fight they were looking for. That's for sure. No healing reduction whatsoever as well. C9 free game. Healing reduction's pretty valuable against C9's comp. Like, this is definitely not the sort of game where LS would be super angry about healing reduction, but if you look at the choices people have made, like Viper's at 1 item, so he hasn't found a spot for it just yet. Santorin's at 1 item, at a Black Cleaver, so he has something that works. The most likely person to build Morellonomicon was going to be Ryze, but the Zhonya's purchase makes a whole lot of sense as well. So at 24 minutes, with where the game is put, it's one of those things where you can't really kind of wag your finger at it as much. Like, the Morellonomicon would have done a lot for Babelta here, but without Zhonya's, doesn't he just die faster? And therefore, the healing reduction doesn't matter. If this was an even game in another 10 minutes, I completely agree with you. But I think with how the fights, with that much burst, I feel like the healing wasn't the main reason they were losing the fight. C9 get the Baron from this, get a lot of control. I just worry that people look at these numbers. Oh, there was some healing reduction there. That's an Ignite. Okay. The Ignite on Aatrox was the attempt there, 379. You look at the numbers and you can be like, wow, he healed 1,000. And, like, I agree. But Aatrox did lose something for his ability to wantonly team fight. So, again, call PapaSmithy and Aatrox skeptic. I think he's good, but not busted. First meaningful lead of the game for C9, even though they've had, again, the implied lead of tempo for a lot of the game. We're definitely in a scenario now where C9 can just load up for easy. But this is going to be a high-value Baron buff because they hadn't been able to push too many objectives beforehand. So you just see them walking in. They're killing things very easily. The only option FlyQuest have is an all-in. Xayah wave clear is not enough, and Ryze doesn't help that much now that Baron buff is there. They're actually answering the Ryze. Licorice has teleport, so I guess he feels like he can just answer the Ryze. He has a pretty large amount of items too, so the 1v1 there, it's pretty hard to actually hit any sweet spots onto an Aatrox, but it's probably the right call for Ryze to be split pushing, to be honest. Just bringing in mini waves, they come in. Like we mentioned, FlyQuest only have all-in options, so they're going to lose more and more here. We don't have the Baron buff power play monitor, but there's a lot of turrets already. So hard for Ryze comps to deal with Baron. They abuse Baron hard, and they get abused by Baron hard too. All this siege is standard. The Ryze eventually path back when the first inhibitor was broken. Otherwise, obviously, you could lose even more. All right, we'll have to watch this one slower. So the initial route, I think this was sneaky. Let's watch this. So this sneaky ult, then you just wombo in. And like we mentioned, if Licorice has got his ult revive, like there's just no counterplay for the enemy team there. So one pick is enough for the Aatrox to just really snowball out of control in these 5v5s. Good job, Licorice. Slow tether. Knocked out slow tether. Even Licorice. I guess we should spell out his contribution here. Because it's Q into slow tether, into interrupt to stop him getting out of the slow tether, and that's where he gets snared. And then you just explode them. This is definitely wombo team fights here. Not a lot of intricate mechanics to point out after the start. Gold lead never balloons. Like, again, it's only 6,000, but it feels like only one team was in this race, and FlyQuest were attending it well, and like they were adjacent to Cloud9 playing a strong game. But Cloud9 made a mistake that like was sobering for them and brought FlyQuest back in. Viper had a really good lone hand in the top side, but otherwise Cloud9 kind of controlled everything. Walking up here, TP on Niski. No one really wants to match him in the top side. It's the right decision for Babelta to be in side lanes. So they're actually threatening something. Otherwise, C9 just get to do everything on their own pace. But it's obviously a pretty hollow attempt to draw any sort of control on them. You need C9 to make a mistake in execution, whether that's inting or taking too long to make a proactive move. And given how proactive C9 already were in this game, it's too little too late to hope for. With Rise bot side, you are 100% sure that FlyQuest never had someone put down vision on the Baron, so all there will be is blue trinkets. There's no other way to put down vision for FlyQuest around the Baron, given that C9's been pushing for the last 3 minutes or so. So you're just looking for that Baron buff face check. Nicely done by FlyQuest here. We should watch the replay of how this happens. So let's see how this starts. So FlyQuest, they're pretty confident with what's going on the top side. Licorice goes in alone. Again, remember, he can't just go super. He has GA, so I guess he can do whatever he wants. But C9 are really desperate to start a fight. Surprisingly far up. If you notice here, FlyQuest have made a couple of smart decisions. For example, the lane control ward means that they're not just going to have all their positionings predictable to allow for a wombo engage from Hecarim from the start. So I really like the control ward that was put down by, I believe, Santorin as they enter. Let's see who put on the control ward here. Yep, so Santorin's control ward here makes it more difficult for C9 to pull off a brush camp turn. JJ walks up, respecting someone coming over the wall when it comes to clearing this one ward. They can't clear that one out. Puts a ward over the wall. That does get cleared out. And then Zeyzal super hard engages. Notice once again, let's just talk about the crowd control. Because our read is that C9, when they hit that first crowd control at the same time, like where the synergy is strong, they should just roll through them. So you want to see synergy here when crowd control is used. If you watch here, I'm pretty slow. Zeyzal dives in, gets an AoE taunt, the CC bar elapses. Notice that Svenskeren and Niski have not actually gone into the fight yet. So that first all-in from Zeyzal, all of Zeyzal's first round of cooldowns have gotten the enemy team C9 nothing. It's only now that we actually start to see some synergy. They get the double CC on to two members here, but the positioning from FlyQuest is really good. Appreciate the positioning here from FlyQuest. Let's watch this from a FlyQuest perspective. After the initial taunts go down, you see Licorice, you see Sneaky, you see one more. You don't see Niski and Svenskeren, but you assume they're over the wall, so they're going to be coming from the top left side of this broadcast vision. Watch Pobelter and Wild Turtle and where they position in the fight. They're able to just take down closest target. They never walk into the AoE at all. And they're able to take down the Silas and the Hecarim with basically no threat onto them at all. Like, compared to Sneaky, who was a bit more zoned out of the fight, I actually think FlyQuest team fought that in like a really awkward position really well, and kind of profited off the desperation of Cena, who just really wanted to fight at that moment. Now, the read is it's probably not smart to jam it all in at that moment when you have so many options. So the criticism of Cloud9 here is that there are many different ways they could win this game, it feels like, and yet they chose a route where they were traded down 3 for 2. So you get GA and also a 1-for-1, but they lose their inhibitor turret. I think so. The question here is, do you start Baron if you're FlyQuest? FlyQuest have never been able to get vision around this area. Remember, we mentioned they had to use blue trinkets to get any vision. And they've lost 2 inhibitors. So it's now or never for them getting a Baron. So I actually think it's correct to start the Baron here. I would say that's a good decision from them. 2-man contest comes in. Licorice still has GA, so walking up is possible. You know, this engage starts around 4,000 health. It's a lot of damage onto Viper. I guess that's Varus autos. One auto Q, auto WQ, I believe, from the Varus there gets the damage. I think overall this is correctly played by both sides. I think there was no way. If you don't make a Baron play there and you just full reset, yes, you keep your Nexus turret up, but I think you lose Baron and just lose the game. So I say FlyQuest made the right decision. I think the contest there is pretty good, and I guess you feel a little bit hard done by the GA's down. We watched this fight a couple of times. This is a really cool fight. I like FlyQuest's fundamentals on this fight of JJ and Santorin frontlining, Wild Turtle and Pobelta finding ways to do relevant damage after multiple fights in a row where they couldn't do any damage. Cool overall. Man, how we got the vision toggle here from the observers. How much of this game has been this vision toggle for FlyQuest? They've had a blank red side jungle in terms of, you know, blanketed out of vision for, I feel like 29 to 32 minutes of a 34-minute game. They see the TP. That does get shown through vision. People often ask about these vision things. If you are looking at that quadrant, for example, I'll show you. Remember, this is with vision toggle on. You will see this. If you are looking there already, you'll see you get no blink on the minimap that this is happening. But if you look up there, you can see the teleport channeling. All right, we're gonna have to watch this one slow. So FlyQuest just try to take first target and try to pull down. That's why you notice Wild Turtle's positioned to the bot side here, because he knows that C9 are coming from top side. I have to even go slower. It's actually a very busy fight. So Santorin dies, and they try to blow up the Aatrox before he can get his passive. To be fair, if Aatrox dies instantly, then they have a chance. However, who was actually able to come with Santorin? Viper only. Holy crap. Svenskeren God modes this fight. Look at Svenskeren here. This is really, so Svenskeren is actually a monster in this fight. Let's pause when Svenskeren has to decide how he approaches this fight. So Galio and Hecarim are the people to think about here, but watch Galio's approach. So it's Hecarim's approach. Svenskeren only now deciding what he wants to do. And usually you'd say, ult per belter. He won't be able to fight back. He doesn't have cleanse. That will isolate him from the fight. That will be how some people approach. Ult the AD carry is what you want to do normally, because then, the AD carry is kept out of the fight. And Hecarim alone can keep someone out of a fight. But Featherstorm makes Xayah more tricky to get to than others. And I love how he approaches this fight. Instead of allowing them to blow up the Aatrox, he ults onto Viper and then pushes away Wild Turtle. He doesn't use E and R on the same target like most people will do. The CC here, this is equivalent of EQ flash from a Jarvan. Yes, Galio hits an awesome taunt flash as well to also influence this, but look how far out Wild Turtle is pushed out of the fight. And Wild Turtle gets basically zoned out of doing anything other than killing a GA while the fight is happening. Meanwhile, Licorice does get his passive proc. Or his ult reset, I should say. And then while Wild Turtle does some pretty good skirmishing, there's just nothing left, right, after all this. Pobelter is another one to watch. Unfortunately, Pobelter can do nothing. When C9 use their tools to push the fight down and left, the big loser is Pobelter, because his entire mana bar and health bar is nothing. It's impressive for sure, but it's not that crazy for him to not use R and E on the same target level. Actually, I mean, you're correct in terms of mechanics, right? But in terms of, I'm Hecarim, what can my champion do? I think too many Hecarims just go to the solo queue mentality of, I have Youmuu's Ghostblade Warrior Enchant and a Trinity Force. I'm going to kill one person hard. And for him to look at a team fight like that and kind of bisect how Hecarim could have the maximum impact, there's no way, in my opinion, the Hecarim could have done more for his team to win than to ult peel, I should say, for the Aatrox and push away the Xayah. I think that was the maximum amount of things you could do with Hecarim's kit. So that's why I want to reward it as being a really smart decision. They clean up the kills from here, and C9 win. So this was a really entertaining game. And I felt like there were a lot of things to take away and learn from. So I think C9 come away with showing that, once again, they're in a proactive mindset, which I am, as you guys all know, very biased towards seeing. I feel like the kind of pace they played this game at was really good, and I think it was a big reason why they were able to take the victory here. I think FlyQuest were too reactionary for a lot of the game, but I did like some of the ways they approached team fights, with the lane control ward, with kind of playing around all the possibilities. I feel like the veteran status of FlyQuest in team fights was there. I'm a bit surprised with how much they fell into the same trap again and again around Vision topside, though. If I was the coach of FlyQuest, that would be my one thing I VOD reviewed between day 1 and day 2 of the LCS, or between week 1 and week 2. Was there was too many kind of easy moments where Licorice got first roam from topside and then found kills, not just deep wards or I got a deep ward on the enemy Krugs and now my jungler can go die a bot lane. No, they were able to get kills topside, and Xayah was basically playing without a jungler because she was down 40 CS and didn't want to fight, did Wild Turtle, because the jungler was being either killed or revealed topside. So C9 kind of got everything and more. In many ways, and super punished some of the vision errors there. So I think the vision game and just the map movement game in the early game was why C9 won this game, because I actually thought they made some pretty uncharacteristically big mistakes around how they approached some team fights, and yet to the aggressive team, the Spoils, they were still able to largely set the tempo of this game, and in spite of kind of 2 huge mistakes, they still never looked like losing. So shout out to Cloud9, but I think FlyQuest, again, they'll be this team that to me is always like a guilty pleasure. I like watching FlyQuest because I think they're close to something. I don't know if that something is winning LCS. I think they're too far away from that. But I think being competitive against the top 3 of the LCS repeatedly, never being slammed in wombo slam by the top 3 of the LCS is something for the remaining 7 teams in LCS to aspire to not make it this class system of 3 teams and 7 teams. And FlyQuest to me is the closest to making that jump, but still with stuff to do. So that's going to be my review of game number 1 review of the night, C9 versus FlyQuest. A fun one for sure. I'm going to take a short break. I'm going to have a bit of a salad and a bit of lunch, and then we'll return with some questions. And also, the second review of the night is going to be TSM versus Team Liquid. So it's going to be a bit of a longer break here so I can get some food in, and then come back with your questions. So thank you very much for watching game VOD review number 1 of the night. We're sticking all Americana tonight and more LCS after the break. Thank you for watching.